overall, let's start with your experience and how it was representing the UNESCO Chair at such high-level international events, specifically these two that took place in Paris.
Yeah, first of all, it was quite a wonderful opportunity to actually have to represent Namibia and also to represent the indigenous communities in Namibia. So it was quite an amazing experience. We had to share with what we are doing here in Namibia, and surprisingly, quite what the work we are doing is quite unique, and we receive quite a lot of recognition for that work. Yeah.
All right. Kindly just tell us more about the focus of the UNESCO Chair in digital technology design with the indigenous people. What is the core mission of NUST?
Yeah, so the core mission of the chair is basically to design digital technologies for indigenous communities. As you have seen, most of the communities in Namibia, they're actually diverse and they are marginalized. They are not included in the digital world. So our goal here is to basically try to actually bring them up to speed so that we can leverage digital technology, such as language technology and so forth.
All right.
Yeah.
And how do you do that with those that are in the rural areas?
Yeah, it's quite challenging. So, but first of all, we mostly targeting educational campaigns where we first look at how do we actually help kids, for instance, not to drop out of school. One of the major challenges with the San communities particularly is that we actually have this issue of kids just dropping out of school. And the issue is always a language barrier. So we now try to visit these communities and actually design the best technologies for them that they can use to sort of learn or sort of adapt in such a way that they can continue with their school.
All right.
Yeah.
Perhaps before we get to some of the technologies that are being developed, as I mentioned earlier that you attended the AI Summit and also the LT for All 2025 conference, which is basically the international conference on language technologies. What were some of the key takeaways from the summit and the conference?
Yeah. So I think some of the main key takeaways from this conference is that we are coming from the global south, right? So we go there in the world, those countries are already developed. But we always have the challenge of infrastructure. Artificial intelligence is moving quite very fast, and we are, most of us, we are basically consumers of the technologies, right? Because we have an issue of data, we have an issue of infrastructure, we don't have compute and all that. So I think looking at this summit is actually a way to say, okay, how do we assist those that are disadvantaged so that we can bring them up to speed? And I think as a follow-up of that particular summit, we just had another summit again, which was just focusing on Africa in Kigali, Rwanda. And the main focus was now, how do we bring Africa closer to the rest of the world? And I think that's quite interesting, actually.
And how do you bring Africa close to the rest of the world?
Number one is Africa is already, we have actually enough resources, right?
Okay.
But what we need to do is we actually need to set up things like data center, for example. We need computes, we need infrastructure. Although with some of the challenges that we're already having, we can actually start somewhere, right? So that we don't just have to rely on the Western countries. Yeah.
Were there any standout presentations or collaborations that caught your eye during the attendance of the summit and the conference?
Yes, there are quite a few presentations that stood out for me. I think particularly for the language technology for all conference.
Yes.
There was one amazing presentation where it was talking about how do you actually help deaf people, right, to learn. Right? Then there were some AI models that were designed to help these people. And it was so much surprise that there's actually quite a number of deaf languages. Like I thought it was just the same throughout.
Yeah.
So it turned out that there's quite different ways in which they communicate.
And the aim is to not leave anybody behind.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Now, you presented research on participatory AI and language technologies. Now, for all of our viewers, what exactly is participatory AI and how does it apply to indigenous communities like Otjisa and Donkerbos?
Okay. So participatory AI is basically a way in which you are actually designing AI technology by involving the communities. So what we are doing is that you don't want to design the technology for the communities, but you want to design it with the community. So you have to involve them throughout the development life cycle. So whether it's a translation application that you are trying to design, so the goal is that the community must be very much involved in that project, right? So from the initial deployment to the testing phase and all this, they actually the one that need to say, okay, this works for us, because you don't want to create something that is just not contextually relevant.
Yeah. Which brings me back to my question that I dropped earlier on. What are some of these technologies that are being developed?
So like currently we're actually developing something called a resilient application, which helps the San youth from dropping out. Then so that is basically just an application which can be a mobile or a web application that these kids can use while they're at school, basically. And it's an ongoing project, and there's actually quite a lot of work that we're already doing on that. And then also some of the technology that we are looking at how to use things like visual and augmented reality in order to, for example, preserve culture, right?
Yes.
Our cultures are dying out. So you actually want to digitize that culture so that even the future generation can actually look at it and say, oh, they were actually the San, the Himba people, and that is what they use. This is how they used to hunt and all that.
All right. So we are preserving and also promoting indigenous languages.
Yes.
Amazing. How are the Otjisa and Donkerbos communities involved? You mentioned it's only right to create a technology where the community is also involved, because you are creating this for the community. How are they involved? If you could perhaps just give us an example of the engagements or the inputs that you got from the communities.
Okay. So first of all, when we actually visit these communities, so they're sort of our core researcher. That's one of the interesting things about this. Whatever we are doing, they are heavily involved. Whatever paper we are publishing, they are part of it. So the way we do is we actually do a community visit regularly. So then we go to the communities, we speak to them, we listen to some of their challenges, then we actually think about the way on how we can solve these challenges. And one of the most interesting things is that as we are trying to solve this, the community is actually involved. We do something called participatory action research, where the community, they are the one that actually have to give ideas on how they want any challenge to be solved. Then they actually, so we are very technical, basically. We can do all the technical stuff. But when it comes to ideas, it should be coming from the community. When it comes to validation, they're actually the one that has to say, oh, this is actually a good product, it works for us. Let's go ahead with it, and all that.
All right. How do you envision the work that you're doing influencing digital policy, education, or perhaps even innovation at grassroots level?
Yeah. So I think this work is actually very, very important, so to say. Just to give you a bit of a backstory, in the Donkerbos community, for example, so it's an Oshirero community, right?
You're right.
So those kids are taught in Oshirero, right? But if you look at some of the educational policies, it actually says that a child is supposed to be taught in their mother language, at least up to grade 4, 5, right? So this is not happening. So now we are actually trying to come up with a way in such a way that we influence policies, right? So there's already something that we are working on, something called the Namibian National Action Plan, which is mainly focusing on different challenges that are faced by these communities, right? So education is one of them, and health is one of them. And this always brings down to language barriers, right? For example, the San communities, they are not really well represented in service deliveries, right? So you go to a clinic, a nurse speaks English, for example. Then these communities, they don't understand, right? So now we are actually trying to find a way in which we can bring them forward, we can actually help them get the best care they can.
All right. Now, in your view, what role do universities, seeing that you're representing the Namibia University of Science and Technology, what role do universities and institutions play when it comes to advancing inclusive and ethical technology development?
So this is mainly through research and innovation, and also through policy makings. So in academia, we are actually mostly, we don't create the policies, but as government create policies, they always ask us to criticize these policies and to give our views on this. And I think that is very important for Namibia as a country, where we actually involve different stakeholders. And academia actually, it's sort of a bridging gap between industry and the communities. So I think that is where we come into play.
All right. And talk to us about some of the upcoming projects or collaborations being planned under the UNESCO Chair.
Yeah, so yeah, it's quite interesting, and we're in the world of AI. There's a lot of interesting things happening. There's actually one of the very, very, very key project, right? So this actually came about when I was in Europe. So I was in Denmark during my time. Then I don't speak Danish, right?
Okay.
So it was, I thought it was going to be very difficult for me to communicate. But with a cell phone, I can actually just scan it, a document, I can scan it, a picture, and I can get this. So under now the UNESCO Chair in digital technology, we actually have a project that we are working on currently. It's called Multilingual Language Translation System for Namibian Languages, where we're actually trying to come up with, to bring all the Namibian languages under one umbrella such that we can actually use AI to do translations for us.
All right. And lastly, Mr. Indongo, what is your message that you would like to share with young Namibians who are interested in the intersection of technology, culture, and also just community development, the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So my message to young Namibians is that remain curious, right? So, and we go out in the world to actually solve challenges that are very close to us. And it's quite unique when you focus on something that is close to your heart.
Yeah.
And it helps you make Namibia a better place. Right. So all I say is work hard. We all have relevant skills. Let's use them to better our country.